Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
Thursday. Week's going quick. Long weekend ahead. All of today's guests on this Thursday, including Farhan Lalji, standing by back from New Orleans, brought to you by the Vancouver Giants. Saturday, the Victoria Royals are in Langley to take on the Giants at the LEC. Puck drop 7 p.m. Also for Family Day this Monday, the G-Man host Prince George, 2 p.m. puck drop. Head to VancouverGiants.com to get single game tickets, flex packs, and more. Farhan Lalji joins us now from TSN. One of 503 people that TSN sent to New Orleans to cover Super Bowl 59. How are you, sir?
I'm good. It was a dream team, a cast of thousands. You know what? And that's kind of one of the great events to work. Like, you love working at Grey Cup because it's so many people from TSN for obvious reasons because we produce it. But then for Super Bowl as well, just it's a good group, and we spend a lot of time there, and we don't take shortcuts on it, and it's a lot of fun to be a part of.
Have you seen, obviously, the Eagles crushing the Chiefs, the favorite Chiefs? Have you seen Patrick Mahomes look that ineffective before or rattled?
No, I think statistically it was the worst game of his career. And, you know, when I go back to the Super Bowl 2 years ago, and look, I don't hang this on Patrick Mahomes because the deficiencies there were pretty plain to see in other areas of the football team. But when I go back to the 2020 Super Bowl when they lost to Tampa Bay, Mahomes still played well. Like, he was running around for his life, and it was the exact same storyline, that it was Tampa Bay's defensive line against not a very good offensive line for KC that particular year. They were able to win immediately and force him to run around, but he still made some crazy throws. And I guess he did in this game in garbage time in the last few minutes, but in that game, I thought he didn't play poorly. In this game, I thought he played poorly. So the offensive line, like, that was the path to victory for Philly. People were talking about Saquon. It was never going to be about Saquon. This was always going to be about whether or not Kansas City's offensive line could hold up. They couldn't. I thought Mahomes did a poor job. I thought Andy Reid did a really poor job. And you know how bullish I am on Andy Reid, but gave them very few answers, got away from the run game and the screen game immediately. I think they all did a really poor job. But, to your original question, I can't remember Patrick Mahomes playing that poorly.
I think the Eagles, I don't know if I got this right, Farhan. It's in the back of my mind. I think they're losing 9 of 10 key players, something like that. What are their chances? You're giving me the look like I got my information wrong.
I think you got your information wrong.
What are their chances of repeating? Big shot.
I think they're high. No, like, look, Jalen Hurts is a good football player, and I know this season had its ups and downs, but what Jalen Hurts did in that game is what he did 2 years earlier in the Super Bowl. He played great outside of one fumble, but they wound up losing the game. You've got Saquon back. The offensive line is back. The receivers are back. Like, there's two players they need to replace. One is Josh Sweat, who had 2.5 sacks and 6 pressures in that game. And the other is Zach Bond, the linebacker, who had 150 tackles this season, had an interception in the Super Bowl, finished 5th in Defensive Player of the Year voting. You know, Howie Roseman, their GM, did a lot of good work keeping the band back together. And they had 7 players start that game on defense that were on their rookie contracts, and only one of them is doing extension, right? And it's not one of their main guys. So if they can get something figured out with one of those 2 key defensive players, they got $18 million in cap space. I don't think they can get both, but if they can get one of them back, I think it's still a pretty good base to work with for them going forward.
Farhan, BC Lions, day 1 of free agency. What did you think of their moves?
I thought they were relatively quiet, which is what I expected. I mean, ultimately, the whole free agency thing happened 9 days earlier, right? The previous Sunday at the start of Super Bowl week when a lot of deals got done with teams, especially Edmonton. So they didn't go out and get a ton of significant players, right? I mean, Hendricks at the defensive line spot, Deontay Williams, I think could help them a lot in the secondary. You know, he's a big physical DB. And then I thought yesterday, adding Micah Awe, which I thought might be coming, but I could see a scenario where Awe and Ben Haladik maybe share a spot because Awe's played in the league long enough that he could qualify as a designated national for half the game, so they could do that. And then if Josh Woods is healthy at the other linebacker spot, they could be in a pretty good spot there. But they didn't make a lot of moves, quite frankly, like big moves, and I didn't think they would just because they couldn't afford it. So, this will be a real test of Ryan Rigmaden's work because I do believe he's a really good scout. But sometimes scouting and coaching, there's a bit of a disconnect because the scout wants you to play the guy. And the coach wants the experienced guy, and they want to be comfortable with what they're doing. So sometimes a guy with a ton of potential gets left by the wayside. That won't happen with Buck Pierce and Ryan Rigmaden. And now that Ryan's in the GM chair, I think some of these young guys will see the light of day, and we'll find out what they're all about.
All right, Four Nations, the local, Quinn Hughes is not there, but Elias Pettersson is. What did you think of his game last night?
Okay. He's okay. And I really liked him in the final game they played before the break, right?
Toronto.
And the pass to Philip Roenick and the reverse hit. But even more than that shift, he was moving his feet. I remember Rick Tocchet saying before the game that, I was watching film with PD and I didn't have to say much. He saw it. And he, in the film session, said, I need to move my feet more, which Rick's talked about for a long time. And it showed in that game that he was turning a bit of a corner. Now, it's only one game, right? Mm-hmm. So I kind of felt and hoped from a Canuck fan perspective, that they would see the best of Petey in this environment. He'd get a break from all that was Vancouver, the stink of the season, go in with a bunch of countrymen and some really good hockey players and thrive in the best on best environment. And then the Canucks might get a different player coming back. Now, look, it's only one game in the tournament, but it is a short tournament. I thought he was just okay. I didn't really notice him. Elias Lindholm, remember before the game a couple days earlier, said the Canucks are going to get a different version of Pettersson when he comes back. I didn't see that yet, but I hope over the next couple of games we do.
Maybe he'll be worse.
Well, he's not going to be worse, but this is the calendar year, right? The poor play began at last year's All-Star break. He went into last year's All-Star break on fire. He was a great player up until that point, and we have seen 12 months of meh. And so I'm hoping that calendar year and this break can give us a bit of a turn. I know he was in a much better mood after the Toronto game in the room and was talking to people and just felt like he was in a different place. So, again, those are all small sample sizes. I hope they continue because the guy was an incredible talent. I just hope for the market's sake that he gets it back.
Absolutely. And were you as impressed as everybody else with the entertainment value served up last night at the Four Nations?
Yeah, I'm a bit of a cynic with this kind of stuff, right? Because I don't like the NHL, right? I love hockey, right? Don't get me wrong, but the entity that is the NHL and how it generally runs things, I kind of roll my eyes at it. And when they try to manufacture these things, we've seen in the past that people don't care. It just doesn't resonate. I think this one did, right? I mean, early on in that game, we saw a couple of big hits that set the tone for how this was going to look. It was fun, right? And the third period, I should say, and oh my God, overtime was breathtaking, right? Mm-hmm. So I do think Team Canada's got a concern in goal. Binnington was good in overtime, but wasn't good until then. But it was very entertaining, and you can see these guys are invested.
I know you like hockey, but you like the NHL, but you don't necessarily like the business that's the NHL. That's what you're trying to say.
That's what I'm trying to say. The way they administer and the way they run the game. Look, watching the best hockey players in the world play hockey, whether it's in the playoffs or whether it's here, you can't not like it, right? It's incredibly entertaining. So I love that part of it. It's just, the way Gary Bettman's NHL is operated and the code and the Old Boys Network with how it's run, I could do without.
And so I know for you, the NFL season is over, CFL season long over, and you're heading back to New Orleans for a vacation. Is that right?
No. I've said before that you don't New Orleans is a place you go to once. Mm-hmm. I've been 6 times for various events. So think of Vegas, think of the Strip, but no casinos and no good shows, and it's dirty, right? So and Bourbon Street is set up for debauchery, right? You go down the street, everything's a kiosk where you can buy alcohol, tons of Crown. Well, I don't know if there's Crown, but there's probably Crown.
Gotta be Crown.
For Rick.
Gotta be Crown.
So, it's a place you go to it once, and, a week is a long time to spend in New Orleans. And they're already talking about another Super Bowl there in 6 years. So between college football and, I don't know if I'll make it another 6 years, but with college, I'll probably get to at least one more time in New Orleans.
We had Moj on last week a few times. Loves New Orleans, but what you just talked about, the sleaziness of Bourbon Street, maybe that makes sense.
Well, that does make sense for Moj. And think of what you do at these places. Do you know what the tourist activity when you're in New Orleans is? Go on a swamp tour. So last year I was at the Sugar Bowl and I brought my wife and she wanted to do tourist things.
Sure.
So we went on a swamp tour. I hadn't been before and it was kind of cool, but like, again, swamp tour. Yeah. That's the thing to do when you're in New Orleans, which should say a lot.
You sound like a snobby Vancouverite. And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. All right. Well, thanks for doing this, Farhan. We appreciate it. Football season is over, but this is the thing.
It's never over. It's never over.
I realize that, but I was going to say, you're so versatile, it doesn't matter. You can talk hockey, football, baseball, it doesn't matter. Basketball, it doesn't matter.
Versatile.
We'll see you next Thursday.